Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as per your time zones and your locations. Welcome to Gautham IT Solution, one of the leading IT training and solutions providers in India. My name is Musab Syed, and I'll be your trainer for Linux administration. I have 12 plus years of IT experience. Most of the trainers in Gautham ITs are well experienced to give you best training experience. In today's class or this video, we are going to talk about introduction to Linux. Many newcomers or the people who are shifting their domain from one to the other wanted to know about Linux. So this video is all about you. In this webinar, we are going to talk about when Unix was introduced, what are the flavors of Unix, GNU Movement, invention of Linux, flavors of Linux, and finally the areas in which Linux is used. So basically, if I start talking about Unix, as it is the mother to Linux, Unix is also an operating system. In general, we use many operating systems like Windows, OS X in Mac OS, Solaris, IBM AIX, many. These operating systems are really important. You know the role of operating system, I guess. Operating system is used to convert user-friendly commands into binary codes, which system understand, and binary instructions into user-friendly options so that we the user can communicate with system and system can communicate with us. There's a beautiful definition for operating system. It's an interface between user and the hardware so that user can communicate with hardware and hardware can communicate with user. So one of the popular operating system that started very early in the computing age was Unix. Unix was introduced by two computing geniuses, Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. Ken is father of Pascal language. Initially, he started to work on Unix, developing it on Pascal language, but it did not went on well. So he combined his project with another great computing genius, that is Dennis Ritchie. I hope you are aware of Dennis. Dennis is father of C language. So on suggestion of Dennis, they started to develop this Unix on C programming language and it was perfect. Initially, when Unix was released, it was not commercialized. Let me tell you one thing, that before Unix also, we used to have many operating systems, but those operating systems were like software. One OS only for one purpose, other OS only for other purpose. Unix came as a unified solution where in one operating system you can use various applications and you can work. So the story begins in the year 1969. In AT&T Bell Labs, this Unix operating system was released. Now, as soon as Unix was released, it was not commercialized. They started to give it to colleges and universities so that students or people can feel what exactly Unix is. But slowly and steadily, people started to understand the importance of Unix. And many big companies wanted to adopt Unix. So they contact AT&T and they ask them to sell Unix. See, instead of selling Unix, they started to sell the most important coding part, which is called as source code. So the source code, the base code on which the operating system was developed, was released by AT&T. They told, if you have a good team of developers or programmers, purchase the source code from us, modify it, and come up with your own flavor of Unix. Consider Unix as an ice cream. How ice cream has many flavors. Same way, Unix is one having many flavors. and each flavor will have a number of versions. Every 2 years, every 3 years, there will be new versions that would be available. So what are the popular flavors of Linux that rule the market? Let's understand. See, the first to come was from HP Corporation, and their flavor name is HPUX. This happened in the year 1984. Same year, Mac OS was released by Apple. I hope you're aware of Mac OS. We use Mac OS, which is now called as OS X, in MacBooks or MacBook Pro and different locations of Mac hardware. Then the topmost of all was introduced by IBM, and the flavor of IBM was called as AIX, where AIX stands for Advanced Interactive Executive. This happened in the year 1986. In the year 1992, one of the very popular Unix came from Sun Microsystem, which is called as Solaris. So earlier it used to called as Sun Solaris, but back in 2010 or 11, Sun has sold itself to Oracle. So now it is called as Oracle Solaris, right? Now, if you look at all these flavors of Unix, they are nothing but Unix. Copy of Unix, you can say, or replica of Unix, you can say. They are all Unixes. One and the other are all same. They are commercialized product. Nothing is free. But apart from being commercial, there is one more thing. All these flavors require a special hardware. They are hardware dependent. That means if you want to go with HPUX, it can only run on a special HP hardware. You might be very well aware of macOS. Mac can only run on Apple's hardware. You cannot install it on any hardware of your choice. Same way, AIX can only run on IBM power systems. It cannot run on any other hardware. So as Solaris, Solaris can only run on Sun or Oracle's hardware. Right now, this combination of software and hardware make it too much costly, right? If we speak up in Indian currency, it would be in lakhs to start with, right? Suppose I wanted to go with IBM AIX. As I told you at the beginning, I started and I worked very well with IBM AIX simultaneously. So I don't know about HP UX or Mac or Oracle, but I can definitely tell you about IBM AIX. See, in today's time, if you want to purchase an entry level IBM AIX machine, entry level is only used for testing or even less than testing environments. It cannot be used on production environment. So an entry level, very basic level kind of server will require you in Indian currency around 25 lakhs rupees. Now investing 25 lakhs rupees or at least some thousands of dollars just for testing environment would be a very expensive affair. So you can just understand if entry level is costing you that much, what would be the cost of enterprise level models? It would be very expensive. So people were really frustrated about it. They really wanted to work with Unix, but the cost involved was so high that they could not afford it. So here came a requirement for an operating system that should be similar to Unix and it should be free of cost. So keeping this in mind, an organization, FSF, Free Software Foundation. See, the name itself is telling you. Free Software Foundation used to make software that is free of cost, can be run on any operating system. Just like open source software, you might be using many open source software today. Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, VLC Media Player, many third-party softwares are there which are wonderful and they are free of cost from open source. So this organization started one movement called GNU Movement. So GNU Movement stands for Generally Not Unix Movement. The idea was very clear. They wanted to make an operating system which is exact replica or copy or exactly similar to Unix, but they don't want it to call it Unix. That is the reason the movement is called as Generally Not Unix. Everything must be same like Unix, same command line, same security, same workability, but it should not be called as Unix. Call it whatever you want, but don't call it Unix. That was the idea behind it, right? So many big names did not join this project, but the young college going students, young programmers, they were very, very enthusiastic about it. Many people tried until a student from Helsinki University, this guy was from Sweden, attending his graduation in Helsinki University. In the summer vacation, when everybody went back to their hometown, in the summer vacation, he sat and he started to work on Linux kernel as a hobby. Slowly and steadily, he made that brilliant change that has totally took over the market of Unix in the 90s, right? So what was that guy's name and who has done that? See, the student from Helsinki University, his name is Linus Torvald. You can see at the right hand side, Linus Torvald is with a mascot called Tux. That little penguin in his hand is called as Tux. So what Linus has done, he developed a kernel. See, kernel is a very, very vital product of any operating system, right? So if you have kernel, you just need some set of softwares. And when you add the software with kernel, you'll get your operating system. So kernel was prepared by Linus Torvald and software was already there with Free Software Foundation. So what they did, they added many useful software with Linux kernel and they came up with first ever free Unix into the market. And this happened in the year 1991. Now the question was what to call this Unix. They cannot call it Unix again because Unix was proprietary of AT&T. So instead of calling it Unix, they started to call it as Linux. Why Linux? I don't have to tell you. On the name of the guy who have developed it. But Linux also have a full form. Linux stands for Linus's Unix. If you combine it together, it becomes Linux. Now, what's the benefit of Linux? Linux is open source. It carries a license called GPL, General Public License. That means you can use it, you can modify it, and you can come up with your own flavor. As I told you in the beginning, to create an operating system, you require a source code, which is a programming bundle. Now, if you go to linux.org website, you will find that source code is freely available. Simply, you have to download it, you can modify it, and you can come up with your own Linux. In fact, if Gautham IT wants, they can also come with their own Linux called Gautham Linux. There is no problem. Everyone can download, modify, and come up with your own flavor of Linux. And the most important part, apart from being free, it is hardware independent. That means you can install and run it on any platform of your choice. You can run it on a physical machine, on a virtual machine, on Dell's hardware, on Samsung's hardware, on Asus hardware, on Acer hardware, on a laptop, on a desktop, or assembled hardware. There is no restriction of hardware over here. Now guys, when you get same command line, same security, same feature, same durability, free of cost, and on a hardware of your choice, what do you expect people would do? See, Linux took over the market like storm. Slowly and steadily, it took over the complete market, and all the Unixes what we have talked about, whether it is HP UX, IBM AIX, or Solaris, they have lost their market. HP has stopped producing HP UX. They have already announced it. Solaris, as I told you, has sold itself to Oracle, and after Solaris 11 or 12, Oracle was no more interested, in fact, to reduce or to introduce new Solaris to the market. IBM fought a great battle with Linux. They tried many strategies. They brought their Linux, Power Linux, many things they tried, but it did not work out for them. And they have also seen a great downfall, and it is very much restricted to a small area in the market. So all people who are working with Unix has now moved on to Linux, and Linux took over the entire market of Unix. Still, there are few areas where Unix is there, but it is not there as it used to be. The whole area is now acquired by Linux. Now we have flavors of Linux that is available in the market. The first to come was Novell, and their product name is SUSE. It came in 1992 from Germany. Then in 1993, Debian released their Linux called Debian Linux, and one of the leading and popular Linux came in the year 1995 from USA, calling it Red Hat. Now, Red Hat used to have different options: Red Hat Linux, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and Fedora. Red Hat Linux for desktops and laptops, user-friendly. RHEL for production environment to be installed on server, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Fedora is a kind of project. Whenever they want to release a new option in Red Hat, they release it in the form of Fedora project. So developers like you and me or other people will use it. They'll try to modify some things, or they'll try to give suggestions. If everything goes okay, that new change will be added into Red Hat. So Fedora is not an independent project or independent product. It is a separate project that is run by Red Hat itself. Now, many other operating systems are copy of Red Hat. Like one of them is CentOS. CentOS stands for Community Enterprise OS, which is exact copy of Red Hat. Whatever you have in Red Hat, you'll be getting the same thing in RHEL. The only thing is Red Hat gives you paid support. SUSE and Red Hat, they are going to give you paid support if you purchase subscription. Subscriptions are not free. Operating system will be free. You can download it, you can install it, and you can use it. There is no problem. Your operating system is never going to get expired at any point of time. But if you need regular support, regular updates, then you need to purchase subscription. The advantage of going with CentOS is it gives you time to time free updates. You don't even have to purchase any subscription. But the limitation is it does not guarantees a support to you, which only Red Hat and other paid subscription things would be giving you. Then another Linux that is a copy of Red Hat is OEL. I missed out in the slide to write it. OEL stands for Oracle Enterprise Linux, which is exact copy of Red Hat. So there might be a contract, there might be a meeting, or there might be some link up between Oracle and Red Hat, that they have a tie-up that every new Linux what Red Hat released, they share a kernel. So Oracle will modify it for their products, and they'll release it in the form of OEL, Oracle Enterprise Linux, right? And another Linux that is again depend on Red Hat is Amazon Linux. I don't know if you are aware of AWS. In AWS, you'll get a Linux from Amazon, Amazon Linux. So Amazon Linux is again based on Red Hat. So you can see that how important Red Hat is. Many important leading Linuxes are based on Red Hat. Another great and a very strong Linux that is used specially in DevOps is from Canonical Limited called Ubuntu. This happened again in the year 2004. Now these are few of the Linuxes what I have named. If we go for all the names, it is going to take too much time. Thousands and thousands of flavors of Linux are there. As I told you, everyone can come up with their own flavor of Linux. So people customize it and use it in different areas. Now let's try to talk about in which areas Linux is very useful. See, you might have heard about virtualization. What is virtualization? See, virtualization is a method of converting physical resources into logical. If I take you back in time, in early 90s, we don't used to have virtualization. So in that case, if you need two operating systems, then we used to purchase two separate physical machines. If I need 10 operating systems, I used to purchase 10 physical machines. Suppose if I need 1000 machines, 1000 operating system, so we will purchase 1000 machines, isn't it? Now just imagine how much space you need to keep 1000 physical machines, and that's not enough. You need to provide networking to 1000 machines. You need to provide electricity to 1000 machines. You need to run ACs around them so that the temperature is maintained. Just imagine the overall cost involved if you go for such a big setup. Now, to reduce the cost and very importantly, to reduce the carbon footprint, to reduce the emissions, virtualization was introduced. Now, with virtualization on a single machine, you can run multiple operating system in the form of virtual machine. So now if you need 100 operating system, you just need one high computing server. On the top of it, you can create virtual machine, and each virtual machine can have its own operating system. So to run separate 100 OS, I need just one machine. Now, what are the leading virtualization provider? Undoubtedly, number one is VMware. You have KVM, you have Citrix, you have RHEVM, you have Oracle VM, you also have Hyper-V, but I did not include Hyper-V in this list. I just included something which is dependent on Linux. So if you look at them, VMware, KVM, Citrix, RHEVM, or Oracle VM, they are all based on Linux kernel, the Linux operating system. They themselves are the operating systems. So a small operating system is used behind the scene, and the OS what they use is a Linux OS. If you log in into their command line, you will find out that it is nothing but Linux. The troubleshooting and all is done on command line. The automation is done on command line. And which command line it uses? Linux based command line. So front end, it might be called with anything, but back end, it is dependent purely on Linux. We also have cloud computing, which is boom in the market nowadays. See, cloud computing is the group of services that is hosted on internet, so that whenever you require to do a task, you don't need to maintain a personal setup. You can borrow a setup from cloud provider, and you can host or make use of those services. In a simple thing, I can tell you that if I wanted to run an application 24 by 7, 365 days, I need to have a rigorous setup. I need to have uninterrupted power supply. I need to have uninterrupted network. I need to have a huge infrastructure, right? So all that thing maybe I cannot afford. So what I'll do, I'll take help of a cloud providers. Cloud providers like Amazon Web Services or Azure or Google Cloud. What they does, they give us the resources that we can use, and they promise us in their SLA, service level agreement, that they are going to provide us the runtime or uptime 99%, sometime 99.9%, sometime 99.119, and in few cases 100% also, so that we can tension free run our setup on cloud, and all our clients and customers can use it throughout the world. The best example of your cloud usage you might be using is Google Drive, SkyDrive, iCloud. You store your data on that and you can access it from anywhere. Same like that, we host our services, our application on this cloud, and we can access it from anywhere throughout the world. The leading cloud providers are AWS or Azure, Google Cloud, OpenStack, CloudStack, all of them are hugely dependent on Linux platform. Especially if you go to Amazon Web Services, if you just check out AWS Cloud Shell, that depends on Linux. If you go for AWS CLI, it works on Linux, and most of their applications are built and developed or dependent on Linux platform, whether it is AWS, Google, or Azure. And for your on-premise cloud, see, sometimes there are few people who does not wants to use public cloud, the cloud which is developed by someone else. They want their own cloud setup. So for them, we will be having OpenStack, CloudStack, and many other things are there. These are all dependent, installed, managed on Linux environment. So again, you know that the importance of Linux is very, very high. Now, in today's time, we also have another big concept which is boom in the market, DevOps. See, DevOps is a culture, if I can ask you in a simple way. See, DevOps is not a tool, it's not a software, it's not an operating system. It is simply a culture that puts all the automation things into one pipeline. Every organization used to have operations team and development teams. There used to be a gap between development team and operation team. The coding part, the software building part used to take time, and till it reaches to operations team, it used to become outdated. Now there used to be a fight between development teams and operation teams regarding the product. To reduce that gap, DevOps, a culture has been introduced where it put all the required things of the organization in one pipeline. Development comes into that pipeline, testing will come into that pipeline, integrations will come into that pipeline, deployment will come into that pipeline, monitoring will come into that pipeline. So all will work as one team. So this reduce the communication gap, and the things will work very smooth and faster as it is automated. Now you can see in this picture there are many tools: Git, Jira, Maven, Gradle, Selenium, or Jenkins, Hudson, Dockers, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, SaltStack, Splunk. Many of them, they are all and all dependent on Linux. Now if you want to be a DevOps engineer, you should have a good knowledge about Linux and scripting inside it. Then only you can call it yourself as a Linux administrator. So all in all, guys, in this thing, I can tell you that Linux is now become a roadmap to any IT technology. Even right now, you might having Linux in your hand or in your pocket or somewhere aside you. See, if you look at Android phones like Samsung and other comes with Android operating system. What is Android operating system? It is also a compressed version of Linux, right? There are many databases, the ruling databases like Oracle or SQL, MySQL, or Hadoop. They all uses Linux. Data mining, data analysis. There are many fields in which you will find out that Linux is very useful. There's a saying in the market that you will die in terms of technology if you don't know Linux in IT industry. if not today, then tomorrow, right? So in order to start your career in IT industry, you must have a good knowledge of Linux. And who else can teach you Linux better than Gautham IT? So you can reach us out to know the schedule when we are going to start the batches and all that thing with great detail. So this is Musab thanking you for watching this video. I hope that this video has cleared your concept in Linux, that what is Linux and in which areas it is implied and how important it is in today's market, right? Thank you so very much, guys, one and all, for visiting us. And do visit to Gautham IT's website to know more detail about all the other courses, curriculum, and plans.